So this video is about carving with your non-dominant hand. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to talk about how I learned to carve with my left hand. I'll talk about why, how, and in what instances it makes sense to do that. I'm going to say left hand throughout this video, but what I really mean is your non-dominant hand. One good reason to teach yourself to carve with both hands is the logistics. If you're carving a small little wood block like this, you can carve it, you can turn it, you can carve it, turn it, and carve it, and it's no problem. But if you work on larger pieces like this one, I work up to 4 foot by 8 foot pieces of wood, it's really inconvenient to turn the block around. It just logistically it doesn't work, especially if you have things on it. Like if I'm carving a huge 4 by 8 foot block, I'll put my light on top of the wood block. I'll have all of my tools like lined up on it, my strop, and whatever else will be on the block itself. So if I want to rotate the block, I have to pick everything up, move the whole thing, dust it off as well because it gets covered in little shavings. So logistically, also the time it saves, not only from the logistical aspect, but it just sometimes it's more efficient to carve in a certain direction. There's certain patterns, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. And finally, for health reasons, if you're carving a big piece, you're probably going to be doing long stints of carving. When I was younger, I would carve 12 hours a day. Now I don't, but if I had to, I probably could. I wear the brace on my wrist for health, just to keep your bones in. When you're carving, it's a lot of repetitive stress and stuff. And also just taking a break every once in a while and carving with the other hand, even if it's just for 20 seconds or 30 seconds. I feel like it's a good break, and it kind of keeps your stamina going as well as your long-term health, hopefully. So I taught myself how to do this gradually over time. I started off on areas where there was a large area of white and nothing to the side of it. So either the area was so large that there's no way you're going to slip and carve into something you've drawn, or it's on the edge of the block like this. And so if you mess up, you can set it up so there's really no damage that you're doing to the block. And that's the thing about learning how to carve with your non-dominant hand, is that you want you want to minimize any problems that you're creating by doing that. You want it not to be noticed so much. So usually what I would do is I would carve a shape like this just along the edge here, give myself a little ridge. And then with my left hand, I would just fit it into that little nook and make sure that nothing is in front of my blade, and take my right hand, push down with my right finger, and just push out with the left. And so you use the right hand to kind of stabilize and to move it around because you have more control that way. When you're first starting out doing this, it's really difficult to control where you're putting the gouger. So you can use your right a lot to help you line it up. But then the movement carving, just use your left and push down with your right if it helps get a little bit more. And you could just do this. You could do the whole row with your left hand. It won't take you too much longer in the short term, and in the long term, like I said, you save time. And just whenever you happen to have a large white area like this, where you're carving from left to right, in this case, just use your left hand. And, you can do this 10 times a year, whatever it is. Every chance you just happen to be carving something like that, just take advantage of it. And then, I go in and kind of clean that up. And so that's the first step, and that's what I would do for quite a long time. And then when I was comfortable doing that, I would move on to something more like this, where the stakes are slightly higher, but it's still pretty simple. And so once again, with my regular carving, my dominant hand, go in and carve along the inner edge. So this is the left side for me. The camera here is upside down so you can see better. And then very carefully, just try to carve the edge of this shape. Top one here with my left hand. And then take the big gouge, carve it out. So this is more of beginner to intermediate kind of step. So I'm thinking about these in like, you get stages where you get more dexterous and more muscle memory. So this would be more of a low to intermediate kind of one because the stakes are pretty low. Carving on this is maybe more intermediate high, this edge, but these parts here, you just have to have enough control that you don't veer off wildly. So like I said, the stakes are higher because it's surrounded by drawing and stuff. So another thing, and so anytime you come across this kind of a shape, you can practice a little bit with the left, time permitting. Another good kind of shape is something like this. So again, I can set myself up for it first. I can carve here on either side of these lines. So I kind of have my boundaries set. And now all I have to do, using my right hand as a guide again, just go straight across. And then the less practice you have, the longer it'll take you to get it in the right place. But you can take your time and get it right where you want it, and then push. And eventually, you can get into a rhythm. It's just about building up that muscle memory. Later on, you can do this without having to think so much. So now I've got this kind of texture. And it doesn't matter that if I carve on top of the lines, like, because as long as it's sort of somewhat evenly spaced horizontals, that's really the look I'm going for. The ink is kind of a shorthand for that. And so just practice on sort of tighter and tighter areas until you're more comfortable. Doing abstract spots can be another great way to practice. Things that maybe where if you mess up, it's not quite so important. So you can look at this tree trunk here. This is fairly abstract. And so if I carve through something, it's not that big of a deal. Kind of go around. And something like this too. I'll do this and I'll switch hands back and forth. And then you also can get more of a variety of mark. You're switching back and forth from left to right. So this is a kind of an organic texture. So if I make the same mark over and over again, it's going to be maybe less effective. But like I said, if I mess up and I carve through something, it's not so super noticeable because it's sort of a random kind of abstract look. One more thing. So that's for practicing. That's for getting better. And it's just whenever you kind of encounter a thing and you feel more comfortable practicing on that, you feel like you're not going to mess up your whole block. Maybe do some of it with the left hand or with the non-dominant hand. I never would carve a whole block like that. I would always take a few minutes, every carving session maybe, and try to find an area where I could practice on. But it would definitely not, because it really slows you down. And like I said, it's kind of an investment skill where it'll pay off in the long term. When good instances for carving with your non-dominant hand. So if you're carving something, I have this pipe here. I drew it from the other side because this one actually makes sense to carve this way. And so I wanted an example for with my left hand. So carving this with your right, it's kind of awkward. You have to, flick up into that shadow, which can be trickier sometimes, and kind of have to angle. I've got the blade angled back towards me to kind of get that roundness, but it's much more comfortable carve it in this direction. So this is something that I would do with my left now in my regular rhythm of kind of carving. And like I carve slower than I do with my right, but This keeps me from having to carve at an awkward angle, keeps me from having to flip a large wood block. Let's do that like I would this one. So this is carving it with my right, just so you can see the comparison. So that's a good shape to carve, to be able to carve with your non-dominant hand in any case like this where it makes sense to go that way. Maybe you want to get a really sharp corner. If I wanted this corner to be really sharp, right? I can come in with my right hand, carve it like that, which is pretty good. Or I can start it with my left and carve one mark that way. And then carve up. Get it a little bit sharper like that. These kind of this corrugated metal here, maybe I want to really have a sharp kind of a feather. And I can come from the inside out and I can get it pretty sharp. But if I start from the outside in, I kind of flick up, I can go a lot faster and get that inside maybe just a bit sharper. It's a tricky skill, especially with your non-dominant hand, but if you can get it, you can kind of get just a slightly, I don't know, a faster looking mark on there. One instance where I would never, ever carve with my left unless it was really logistically necessary. It's just something sort of long and even like this. Because I can go either way. I can carve comfortably this way or this way. So I'm always going to carve this my right. So there's no real reason. Like if I wanted to get that corner, I can come in like that. That would be what I would do on this. And finally, some random shapes like this. I can carve out the middle with my right. Then I can come in, and if I want this to be rounded, I can get it to follow the shape of my gouge a little bit easier than if I was going the other way. And so that's why you might want to carve with your non-dominant hand and how you might teach yourself to do it and when are some good instances to use it. If you have any other suggestions for it or thoughts, or if you've tried it yourself, please let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.